today I have my special guest. He is astrologer royal, astrology for leaders, innovators, and change makers. None other than Miss Aleksandra Ceho. Welcome, welcome, Miss
Thank you.
Alexandra.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here today, Daniel.
Likewise, Miss Alexandra, and welcome on Entrepreneurship 101. And can you please introduce more about yourself without argument?
Well, Daniel, I am an international instructor with the Modern Mystery School, specializing in astrology. And I have been a practicing astrologer for 20 years now. And I primarily work with entrepreneurs, especially in the field of forecasting for business, as well as working with Hermetic principles in order to manifest not only a strong business, but also a better and more balanced reality.
Yes, better achievement and balance for sure. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Miss Alexandra. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And today let's talk about helping entrepreneurs and business executives pursue and prepare for imminent events. So let's start with the core skill. Strategic foresight, more about protecting specific events or about developing a mindset or toolkit to navigate an inevitable uncertainty. What is the fundamental shift leaders need to make?
So, whenever someone owns a business, an entrepreneur, or I mean, if you have a large scale corporation, you really need to have your eyes on all aspects of that creation of that business. And we all come with our own natures. So we have areas that we tend to pay attention to, where we're really on the ball, where we do well. But then also, as creators, we have other areas that perhaps are not necessarily our areas of strength, or where we may not necessarily think to look. So in working with astrological forecasting, it gives you the opportunity to be cognizant of every area of your business, because for many people, they're going to focus a lot on marketing, but at the same time, if all you focus on is marketing and perhaps you're not putting out necessarily the highest quality product or service, then what's the point of the marketing? Right. And, especially this especially actually applies to especially product based businesses, because there are other factors that are involved in the success of your business. Everything from the suppliers that you work with to things like shipping. And, there's so many interconnected parts. And so when you use astrological forecasting to keep yourself cognizant of the forces that you can work with, it makes life so much easier, and you find that you don't get blindsided by sudden events.
Interesting, Miss Alexandra. So tell us. Many executives are rewarded for quarterly results, yet foresight requires looking years ahead. How do you build a justified foresight function in a company culturally and financially obsessed with the present?
Well, in order to achieve whatever you have in the present, a lot of things have to go right, or wrong potentially, in order to
Yes.
have what you have right now. So your present is the culmination of preparation that you have done up until this point in time. So your success is not the result of your immediate efforts. It's a result of the efforts that you put in 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. So energy always builds, and preparation is really the key to worthiness, and one of the keys to abundance and manifestation. So when you work with forecasting, what you are literally doing is you are preparing yourself properly. When you know what's coming, then you can make the adaptations, make the decisions, gather the resources that are necessary in order to make the most of whatever is coming your way. And so, if you have a time where, as an example, as a business, uh, publicity is really going to pay off well for you, well, then you're really going to want to turn to your advertising, to your media, to your marketing, and really get that on the ball. Whereas if you know that you're approaching a moment of, let's say, change, innovation, scarcity, not necessarily directly for your business, but for the market that you work with itself, well then, how can you begin to pivot ahead of time so that you're ahead of the ball, so that your competitors are watching you move forward when they're still trying to figure out what's happening?
Interesting and empowering answer, Miss Alexandra. We all have cognitive biases like optimism biases or anchoring. Which one of the most dangerously blinds leaders or a business to imminent events, and what is the simple practice to counter them?
Well, what I would say is the mindset that undermines business leaders the most is literally being caught in the moment, and a task oriented mindset without without a timeline, I guess I could say, right? And so when you have that task oriented mindset without any sense of timeline and vision into the future and perspective of what you are building into, that is when you are the most likely to be blindsided. In everything that you do for your business, you really have to approach it from a place of purpose. So for many entrepreneurs, especially in the beginning, it's very easy to fall into that mindset because most of what you have to do is immediate tasks, right? And you're trying to build a future, so you may not necessarily think too much about it. You focus on the present. But when you engage tasks without the um, purpose, forefront in your mind, what ends up happening is you end up making decisions and you end up taking actions that don't contribute to the long-term viability and success of the business.
Let's talk about the signals and systems, Miss Alexandra. The concept of weak signals is crucial. Where do you look for these faint hints of change? Communities, pattern fillings, or strange news before they become mainstream headlines?
So I don't look at any of those things. What I look at is I look at what are called astrological transits. And um, especially when you start delving into what is called financial astrology, or if you look at more historical astrology, there are always transits that hint at oncoming change. So to take ourselves back, oh my gosh, 6 years ago now, Daniel.
Hmm.
COVID was 6 years ago.
Yes.
so,
So fast.
um, so during COVID, uh, actually just prior to, we had a transit called Saturn conjunct Pluto, and it's an aspect that occurs approximately every 36 years. And Saturn conjunct Pluto uh, has been known to have drastic effects on the housing market and also bring change to governmental systems. So Of course, there was also an element because they were conjunct in Capricorn, which is one of the signs of the underworld, so to speak, and so there was a lot of fear and hysteria around COVID uh, that can absolutely be attributed to it. But again, if we jump back in time, we go back to the last time, um, Saturn was conjunct Pluto. That also coincided with the drop of the housing market in the 80s and early 90s, right? So when we look at aspects like this and we see the long-term patterns and how they show, it's very easy to identify the not only change but what kind of change and the potential consequences of it. And so bringing it back to COVID, isn't it kind of interesting how, um, again, we've had this massive housing bubble that started as a result of COVID and now has made homes unaffordable for many people. And so this is a repetitive cycle that we experience every time Saturn and Pluto are conjunct.
So, Miss Alexandra, how do you effectively distinguish between a passing trend and a true shift that will reshape your industry's foundation?
Well, you know, sometimes a passing trend can become a real change. And there are cycles that we can work with, but then sometimes there are cycles that we can use to create waves ourselves. So, how do you distinguish? Well, truthfully, is the change that you see here to stay? So to give you an example, Daniel, I mean AI. Do we
Hmm.
see that going anywhere? No.
Well, it will last.
That's something that's made its way into our world and is not leaving anytime soon,
Hmm.
right? So, especially when it comes to technological innovation, the truth is it stays. And so when you have technological innovation that applies to your business or applies to the industry that you work with, that technological evolution is going to remain. That's just the nature of humanity. We don't do away with things that make life more convenient for us.
True. Yes,
When it
definitely
comes to
true.
human emotion though, and opinion, oh, yes, absolutely. Can change at the drop of a hat, right? And so
Hmm.
this is why things like public relations exist.
Mm, certainly. So let's talk about the scenario planning. How do you move beyond the generic best case or worst case to build a three, four truly challenging, plausible, and useful scenarios that stress test your strategy?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question? I couldn't hear it entirely.
Yes, definitely. So let's talk about the scenario planning. So how do you move the generic best case or the worst case to build three to four truly challenging, plausible, and useful scenarios and stress test yet strategy?
Okay. So when it comes to your best and worst case scenarios, right? Again, I work with this concept of forecasting, and so within forecasting, there's different forms. So I'll stick to what are called transits right now, and in transits. Um, so in transits, what happens is um, it helps you to identify incoming energies, incoming cycles. So depending on the nature of the business, because I mean, how I work with a new entrepreneurial firm versus one that's been established and has had cycles of information and data over time is very different, right? So so when you identify these transits, what you do is it gives me an insight into what I am looking at, number one. So, is my, like let's say, for example, that I am looking at transits to Saturn. And transits to Saturn affect things like um, your your suppliers, right? So supplies and suppliers, resources. It affects the key activities of the business, and especially in a case of any kind of business that involves engineering or manufacturing, it governs over those constructive aspects. So when I'm looking at the business, usually the nature of the transit indicates to me, whether or not I need to look at a best case scenario or a worst case scenario. And and so when I have these positive aspects to Saturn, what that tells me is that you are entering a period of productivity in whatever capacity. And so this might be your time to look into the possibility of new negotiations with resources and suppliers, as an example. This is also a time where you might want to refine or purchase new equipment or refine your process in terms of manufacturing, production, that kind of thing. And so I'm not necessarily the stress tester, but rather I leave the agency in the hands of the entrepreneur themselves. My role is to guide and to provide insight at the key activities that you want to approach during that time. Now, if somebody also has, say, a negative aspect to Saturn, well, knowing this ahead of time, how can you potentially buffer what you know is coming? So as an example, if you know that you have hard aspects to Saturn coming and perhaps you have aging equipment on the floor, well, maybe you may want to invest in checking up on that equipment, having it tuned up, whatever it is that it needs. If you know that you have resources that are on the scarce side, well, if you have hard aspects to Saturn coming up, then perhaps you want to stock up ahead of time, knowing that scarcity plus hard transits are going to make that perhaps harder to get and affect your production.
Very well said, Miss Alexandra. So let's talk about the organizational muscle. Foresight is useless if it doesn't lead to action. How do you create a process that seamlessly turns insight from your scanning into a concrete experiments or strategic pivots?
Well, Daniel, this is where deliverables come in real handy.
Hmm.
so, uh,
Yes.
um, in my work with professionals and with entrepreneurs, there are deliverables that I work with. There is an aspect of accountability that is incredibly important. And so when I work with entrepreneurs, when and I also work with executives and that kind of thing, I always give them deliverables because going back in history, there was this infamous prophet Cassandra,
Hmm.
who had the ability to prophetize. She was she lived in Troy, and so she knew about the Trojan horse and the downfall of Troy, but she was cursed with never being listened to. And
Yes.
and so, in my role as a guide, in my role as an astrologer, I always advise there are certain deliverables that I ask of my clients, not from the perspective of I need them to prove anything to me, but rather that this is about building their future and manifesting the future of their business, which often many times also means their personal livelihood. And so in holding those deliverables and maintaining accountability to these actions, um, this is where forecasting really becomes a positive, powerful tool to help you take your business to the next level.
Mm, yes, indeed. To the next level. We love that, Miss Alexandra. And reteaming is a powerful tool. How can a leader practically and safety encourage internal design to challenge strategic assumptions and uncover blind spots?
Well, this is where, in working with my clients, I always start with a natal chart first. So the reason that I do that, Daniel, is because I need to have an understanding of my client who's sitting before me. How can you guide somebody if you know nothing about them? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even
Sure.
if you know your even if you know their business and you know their business well, and of course I also do the natal chart for the business itself, but I need to understand the person in front of me because, as you mentioned, everyone has their blind spots. They have their talents, their strengths, the areas that they do well in and excel, but then there are either areas that perhaps they avoid out of maybe insecurity,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or that they just don't really think of. It's kind of in like almost like a blind spot, like on a 45 degrees behind their head kind of area for them. And so their perspective naturally does not go there. And so in working with my clients, when I do that natal chart, I have an understanding of how they function, where their strengths are, and what I'm going to need to remind them of and how I'm going to support them. Because for some clients, as an example, um, they might be innovators. However, the practicalities are their blind spot. And so in guiding them and in the deliverables that I ask, I'm going to ask key questions about the practicalities of whatever it is that they're working on. Have you got the resources? Do you have a timeline? Do you have a plan set out? Right? These are all things that I'm going to bring into how I work with my clients so that I make sure I'm supporting them in the right way. Because a client who doesn't pay attention to the practicalities needs to be supported in a different way than a client who is absolutely amazing at what they do but not confident.
Very well said, Miss Alexandra. But before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please don't listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in a sixth season, abstract poetry in third season, and of course, my book 101 review in sixth season as well. And my Food 101 in its sixth season too. And of course, my other podcasts, which they are new right now, like Geography 101, Love Letters, Movie 101, Review Music 101, are in fifth season, people, fifth season already. And of course, my Science 101 and Sex 101, it is in fifth season. Trivia 101, Law 101, Mental Health 101, Motivation 101, Entrepreneurship 101, and of course, my Bible Verses 101 are my baby podcasts. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcasts. So, Miss Alexandra, in 5 billion years, the sun will become a red giant and then white dwarf. Was its lasting physical legacy in the galaxy, and the elements of it scatters the planet and transform long after it dies?
Well, we'll be gone by then.
Yes.
We'll
Yes,
be gone by then.
definitely. So how
But
would you
it's
predict
legacy.
that?
That's a
Mhm.
great question. You know, human life has been a wonderful thing. And
Mm.
life on this planet has been a beautiful thing. And so I hope that when the sun reaches that capacity, that its legacy will have been creating that beauty of life that perhaps takes that beauty and brings it elsewhere into the universe.
Mm, definitely. Well, sorry for that. What inserted question, Miss Alexandra? Just wondering about.
Yeah.
So, in your experience, what is the single most common reason otherwise smart leaders to fail to see and prepare for imminent event that later hits them?
You know, that's a great question. And I often think it is because of the multidimensional nature of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
So, one thing that people forget in in professional roles and in entrepreneurial roles is that we're not just business people. We're not just entrepreneurs. We're not just creators. And so sometimes other areas of life call our attention, which can mean that we're not necessarily paying attention to our business in the way that we need to. And it's not to say that that's wrong, right? Sometimes family calls you, or your partner needs you, or you have health things you need to deal with. And that's why having that astrological support to keep you cognizant of those things when your attention needs to be elsewhere is so important.
So important indeed. So, Ms. Alexandra, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your business, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Absolutely. I would love to have everyone join me on astrologerroyale.com. And
Yeah.
while you're there, I actually have a free ebook called Star Powered Resilience. And it is a zodiac inspired guide to your professional strengths and talents, and also some very actually travel friendly tips on how to mitigate stress.
How to mitigate the stress. We love that, Miss Alexandra. And people, let's support Miss Alexandra Ceho, because if you support her for sure, more and more empowering advocacy like this to rise. So I have one more question, Miss Alexandra, before I will let you go. And if or after a lifetime having this gift that guiding this entrepreneur or entrepreneurs for their business, what is your best advice for them?
You are a powerful creator, and having a business is going to challenge every aspect of your nature. You will have to learn, you will have to grow, and you will have to sacrifice opinions and parts of yourself in order to bring whatever kind of goodness that you are looking to create into the world. I truly see business as a valuable way to bring good things to others. And in service, there is always an element of sacrifice. So don't be afraid of that, and don't be afraid to grow.
Hmm. Definitely don't afraid to grow, people. And one more, Miss Alexandra. If an entrepreneur has 1 hour this week to improve their foresight, what is the single most valuable exercise they should go?
Well, I would encourage you to look at two cycles. Number one, the cycle of your day. And
Mm-hmm.
so that includes your personal energy levels as well as the flow of what you're doing, and making sure that that's in alignment. And number two, I would also encourage you to look long term. And so, for some people, that's going to be for a year. For some people, that's going to be perhaps a 5 or 10 year flow or cycle that they are looking at. But taking care of both the micro and macro is the best thing that you can do, and just identifying where you're at with it.
Yes, Miss Alexandra Ceho. Ceho. Thank you so much for your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And thank you so much for your time.
It was my pleasure and my honor. Thank you, Daniel.
Likewise, more to come, people. See you soon.